You know, it's funny, when you're climbing that software engineering ladder, and everyone's always whispering about what it takes to reach that senior level. Like it's this mysterious club with, I don't know, like secret handshakes and rituals.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, today we are busting those myths wide open.
Love it.
We're doing a deep dive into a blog post by Luciano Momino. He's a dev who's actually been there, done that. And he has some really insightful takes on what it actually means to be a senior engineer.
And it's not just a laundry list of skills, right?
Yeah.
This deep dive gets into the headspace, the impact, how to genuinely level up. And I think it's going to challenge some assumptions people have about seniority, especially that old chestnut, about years of experience being the defining factor.
Ugh. Yes. Those job postings, 5+ years of experience, as
Right.
if that magically transforms you. I always wondered, like, if that were true, wouldn't everyone at a company eventually just be senior by sticking around long enough?
What's a good point?
It doesn't quite add up.
No, it doesn't. And
Ugh.
Mamino nails this right out of the gate. I mean, time obviously plays a role, right? The more you work, the more diverse challenges you face, the more you learn, hopefully. But he has this great anecdote about working with developers fresh out of college who are operating at a senior level and others who'd been coding for decades but weren't quite hitting that mark.
Wow. Okay, so if it's not about racking up years on the job, what does he say is at the heart of being a senior software engineer?
He boils it down to this: moving projects and people forward.
Okay, I like that.
He uses this term force multiplier, which I love. You're not just cranking out code in a vacuum. Your expertise elevates everyone around you.
That's a huge shift in perspective. It's almost like the definition of a senior engineer hinges on leadership from day one.
Exactly. And that's why he dives into this concept of the T-shaped skill set.
Oh, interesting. I've heard of that, but I'd love to hear more about what that means in this context.
Okay, so picture a T, right? The vertical line is your deep expertise, your vertical, in one area. Let's say for you, it's API design. You're the go-to person. You've got that mastery.
Right, but I can't just bury my head in API docs all day. What about the rest of the project? All those other skills I don't have.
That's where the horizontal line of the T comes in your broader understanding of other areas. So if your vertical is API design, you don't need to become a database guru overnight. But you do need enough knowledge to collaborate effectively with the database team. Right.
So it's about knowing enough to ask the right questions, understand those dependencies, and just communicate clearly with other specialists.
Exactly. And Mamino gives some really solid examples. Let's say you've mastered back-end API development. Maybe you branch out a bit into front-end work to see how your API is integrating with the UI. Or you delve into infrastructure as code to get a handle on how your code gets deployed and scaled.
It's almost like strategically becoming a polyglot. Not of languages necessarily, but different areas of expertise within software development.
Precisely. And it's not about becoming a jack of all trades, but rather having enough understanding to see the bigger picture and collaborate across disciplines.
Okay, I'm with you. So this T-shaped skill set, is that what he considers the foundation for that force multiplier effect, that ability to lead and elevate the whole team?
It's definitely a core component. But here's where we move beyond just the technical skills and start to unpack the mindset of a truly effective senior engineer.
Okay, now we're getting to the juicy stuff. I love it. It's like, yeah, technical skills, maybe that got you the interview, but this is what wins you the job and helps you excel in your career.
Absolutely. And Mamino's a big advocate for the growth mindset, being comfortable with failure, seeing it as an opportunity to learn and iterate, not being afraid to take calculated risks.
I can see how that makes a lot of sense, especially for someone in a senior position who's often making decisions with maybe limited information.
Yeah, it's about leading by example, right?
Mhm.
If you as a senior engineer are freaking out every time there's a bug or setback, what message does that send to your team?
Totally. Yeah, it sets this culture of fear and blame rather than one of learning and improvement.
Exactly. So embracing that growth mindset, being open about what you don't know, asking for help when you need it, that's what sets a true senior engineer apart.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. So we've got the T-shaped skill set as that foundation. The growth mindset is this guiding principle. And now I'm sensing there's another layer to this senior engineer mindset, right?
You're picking up on it. Mamino talks about becoming an active lever. It's about being proactive, asking those tough questions others might shy away from, bridging the gap between the nitty-gritty technical details and the larger business goals.
So not just taking orders and executing tasks blindly, but actually understanding the WHY behind the work and making sure it aligns with that overall strategy.
Right. And that brings us to one of the trickiest aspects of being a senior engineer: knowing when and how to say no.
Ooh, that I saw was a tough one. It's easy to fall into that trap of wanting to please everyone, taking on every task that comes your way, but I imagine that can lead to burnout pretty quickly.
It absolutely can. And it can also lead to poor decision-making if you're constantly stretched too thin. So Mio offers some really insightful advice on this. He talks about reframing no as no BUT.
Okay, I like where this is going. So instead of just shutting down a request or an idea, you're offering alternatives, proposing different solutions, basically guiding the conversation toward a more positive and productive outcome.
Exactly. It's about being a strategic thinker, not just a code monkey. And that requires a deep understanding of both the technical landscape and the business context.
Sounds like communication is key here, being able to articulate your concerns clearly, persuasively, and to propose solutions that really address everyone's needs.
You are spot on. Communication is the thread that weaves all of this together. In fact, Mamino has this fantastic quote about it. Good communication is as stimulating as black coffee and just as hard to sleep after.
Oh, I like that one.
We'll dive deeper into the power of communication in part 2 of this deep dive.
I can't wait. This is already making me rethink my whole approach to seniority. It's so much more nuanced and multifaceted than I ever imagined.
It truly is. And we've only just scratched the surface. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore the importance of communication, autonomy, and how to make things just a little bit better every single day. So remember that quote we left you with. Good communication is as stimulating as black coffee and just as hard to sleep after.
Oh, yeah, I definitely remember that one.
That's not just a catchy line, though, right?
Yeah.
For senior engineers, communication, it's like the superpower that can really make or break a project.
It's more than just being able to explain, like, technical stuff clearly, right? I'm guessing it goes way deeper, especially when you're in that active lever role, having to say no, BUT, strategically, like we talked about.
You got it. It's about communicating uncertainties, proposing solutions, owning up to failures, and advocating for your ideas, but doing it in a way that influences decisions without being, like, dictatorial.
Right, right. Because you don't want to be that engineer, the one everyone avoids because they know you're going to steamroll them.
Exactly. So think about it like you have to explain a complex technical trade-off to a non-technical stakeholder.
Ooh, yeah, that's the scenario every engineer dreads. You're trying to explain why the quick fix they're pushing for is going to create a monster in the code base 6 months down the line.
100%. It happens all the time. So let's say you have to choose between two database solutions.
Mhm.
Okay. One is super performant, but it would require a major overhaul of your architecture.
Okay, I see where this is going.
The other is easier to implement now, but it might not scale well as the user base grows, right? As the senior engineer, you need to explain this to stakeholders, highlight the risks and benefits, and then recommend a path forward.
And that might involve pushing back against a stakeholder who just wants the fastest solution, even if it's not the best long-term decision. It's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where senior level communication really shines, right? It's finding that common ground, building consensus, and ultimately making sure the project is successful, even if it means having some uncomfortable conversations along the way.
So I'm hearing this communication superpower. Is that something you can practice? Or are some people just naturally gifted communicators?
It's definitely a skill you can hone.
Yeah.
For me, what really helped was seeking out opportunities to present to different audiences.
Okay, that makes sense.
So start small, maybe explain a technical concept to a colleague from a different team, and then gradually, work your way up to presenting to larger groups, stakeholders, that kind of thing.
It's like public speaking. The more you do it, the less terrifying it becomes.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get feedback on your communication style. Ask colleagues for honest opinions on your presentations, reports, even just day-to-day communication. It's amazing what you can learn from, like, constructive criticism.
That's good advice. Speaking of things that can be a little scary, Memino also dives into the importance of autonomy for senior engineers. But, and I'm guessing here, it's not about becoming a lone wolf, holing up in your coding cave and never talking to anyone.
No, definitely not. It's about knowing when to dive deep into a problem, work independently to come up with solutions, but also knowing when to, like, come up for air, check in with the team, share what you've learned, get feedback.
So finding that balance between deep work and collaboration.
Precisely. And avoiding a common pitfall for senior engineers, that is, getting so caught up in the technical details that you lose sight of the bigger picture or even the needs of the team.
Yeah, it's easy to get tunnel vision when you're tackling a really challenging problem. You just kind of zone in and the rest of the world fades away.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have those regular check-ins, those moments where you step back and you ask yourself, am I still on track? Is this the best approach? Do I need to loop in other team members?
It's like having those internal checkpoints throughout a race, making sure you're still heading in the right direction and haven't totally veered off course.
Ooh, I love that analogy. And it leads perfectly into another key aspect of seniority that Mamino highlights, which is that drive to make things, even if it's just a little bit better every day.
Okay, I love that idea, but what does that actually look like in practice? Is it about taking on these massive refactoring projects or something?
It can be, but often it's about the small incremental improvements that really compound over time. It could be as simple as documenting a process that everyone finds confusing or refactoring a messy function that's been causing headaches.
Or maybe automating a repetitive task that's been like eating up everyone's time.
Exactly. It's recognizing those little pain points
Mm.
and taking the initiative to address them.
Right?
Might not seem like a big deal at the time, but those small wins, they can have a huge impact on the overall efficiency and the morale of the team.
It's like the broken window theory, but applied to software development. Like those small acts of neglect, if they're left unaddressed, they can create this sense of apathy and eventually lead to bigger problems. But when you take the time to fix those small things, it creates this culture of care and attention to detail, you know?
That's a brilliant way to put it. And it ties back to that force multiplier effect, right? When you, as a senior engineer, model that behavior, that commitment to making things a little bit better, it inspires others to do the same.
Yeah, it's like you're raising the bar for everyone, not just through your technical expertise, but through your actions and your attitude.
Precisely. And it can have this ripple effect throughout the organization. Imagine a team where everyone feels empowered to identify those small areas for improvement and to take ownership of making those changes.
That's a team that's constantly innovating and evolving, always pushing forward.
It is. And it's a team that's likely to be more engaged, more productive, and ultimately more successful.
Mimino actually shares a really interesting anecdote about what he calls free study days at his company, which kind of ties into this idea of continuous improvement. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so his company, they encourage employees to dedicate 1 day a week to personal study and development.
Wow, a whole day. That's a pretty significant commitment. I imagine some companies would like balk at the idea of losing a day of productivity each week.
You'd think so, right?
Hmm.
But his company, they see it as an investment, not a loss. They recognize that by giving their employees the time and space to learn and grow, they're ultimately fostering a more innovative and adaptable workforce.
Yeah, it's a long-term strategy, right? You might not see the immediate return on investment, but over time, it pays dividends in the form of increased creativity, improved problem-solving skills, and just a more engaged and motivated team overall.
Exactly. And it's in such a powerful message to the employees. It's like saying, we value your growth. We want you to be challenged. We want you to be at the forefront of your field.
It's like saying, we trust you to use this time wisely, to explore your passions, and to bring back new ideas and perspectives that will benefit the entire organization.
Absolutely. It's about empowering employees to become active participants in their own development, rather than just passive recipients of, like, training programs.
So for our listeners who are thinking, yeah, that sounds amazing, but there's no way my company would ever go for that, what advice would you give them? How can they advocate for something like this in their own workplaces?
Well, I would say start by highlighting the benefits, both for the individual and the organization as a whole. Gather data, right? Show the impact of continuous learning. Show how dedicating time to professional development can actually lead to increased innovation, improved problem-solving skills, a more engaged and productive workforce.
And maybe share some examples of other companies that have successfully implemented similar programs and highlight the positive results they've achieved.
Yeah. Case studies, real-world examples, those could be super persuasive. And don't be afraid to start small, right? Maybe propose a pilot program where a few teams can experiment with dedicating even a half day each week to personal development.
So it's about demonstrating the value and building that momentum. And who knows, maybe it'll catch on, become a company-wide initiative.
You never know. The most important thing is to be persistent, keep advocating for what you believe in, and to show that you're committed to your own growth and the growth of your team. After all, that's what being a senior engineer is all about.
We've covered so much ground already. Communication, autonomy, the power of making things a little bit better each day. But there's still more to explore in Lamino's blog post, right?
There is. We'll be back in part 3 to dive deeper into the concept of selling yourself as a senior engineer,
Yeah.
and we'll leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into what it really means to be a senior software engineer. And we've talked about skills, mindset, company culture, all that good stuff. But now let's tackle something a bit more personal, a bit more, I don't know, maybe even a little uncomfortable. How do you actually sell yourself as a senior? I even feel weird saying it, Like I'm supposed to go around bragging about every line of code I've written or
I
something.
get that feeling. Nobody wants to come across as arrogant or, full of themselves. But luckily, Mamino frames this whole selling yourself thing in a way that's more about self-discovery and alignment rather than just, shameless self-promotion.
Okay, I like the sound of that a lot better. So where do we even start with this?
It starts with honestly assessing what you bring to the table. And I don't just mean your technical chops, but the value you create for the team, for the company, for the users, the whole ecosystem.
So instead of just listing like programming languages on my resume, I should be highlighting times I took initiative, right? Like maybe I improved a process that was slowing everyone down, or I mentored someone who's now totally killing it in their role because of, my guidance.
Exactly. Those are perfect examples. It's about showcasing the impact you've had. Connect your technical skills to the bigger picture. How did your work contribute to the business goals? Did you help ship a product faster, improve user engagement, save the company money? Those are the stories that demonstrate senior level thinking.
It's like instead of just saying, I can build a bridge, you're saying, I built this bridge and it allowed 10,000 people to reach their destinations each day, which boosted the local economy. It's about the outcome, not just the skill itself.
You got it. And this probably leads into another crucial aspect of the senior mindset that Mamino highlights, which is this ability to handle ambiguity and uncertainty. Because, let's be real, the higher you climb, the less clear-cut the problems become.
Oh, I have definitely felt that already. You go from fixing these like well-defined bugs to figuring out why the whole system is suddenly slow and nobody has a clue where to even start looking. It's way more intimidating.
And that's where senior engineers, they really shine. They don't shy away from those messy situations. They lean into the ambiguity, break down the problem, gather information, and they start experimenting to find solutions.
So it's almost like being a detective, right? You've got all these clues, these weird symptoms in the system, and you got to connect the dots, figure out what actually happened, and then come up with a plan to fix it.
I love that analogy. And it requires strong communication skills too, right? You need to be able to explain the problem to stakeholders, set realistic expectations, and get everyone on board with your proposed solutions.
So it's not just about being technically brilliant, but also being a leader who can like navigate that uncertainty and inspire confidence in the team, even when things are a little chaotic.
Absolutely. And this ability to handle ambiguity, it's not something you're just born with. It's a muscle you can develop. One thing that helps is focusing on the process, not just the outcome. So break down those complex problems into smaller, more manageable steps and celebrate the small wins along the way.
That makes a lot of sense. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when you're just scaring down this giant, hairy problem. But if you can break it down into those bite-sized pieces, it just becomes less intimidating.
Right. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Even the most seasoned senior engineers, they don't have all the answers. Knowing when to tap into the collective knowledge and experience of the team, that's a sign of strength, not weakness.
It all ties back to that collaborative spirit we talked about earlier, right? Senior engineers being those force multipliers, elevating the whole team through mentorship and knowledge sharing. Which actually, speaking of knowledge sharing, Mamino's a big advocate for something he calls going one level deeper. Can you explain what he means by that?
Well, yeah. So it's about not just knowing how to use a tool or a technology, but understanding how it actually works under the hood.
So instead of just knowing how to, call an API, I should actually dig into the HTTP protocol, maybe even try building a simple server myself to really grasp the concepts.
That's exactly it. He shares this story about how he gained this deep appreciation for the HTTP and TCP protocols by actually building a small prototype that implemented them. It wasn't about creating, production-ready code. It was about the learning process, the aha moments that
Yeah.
come from hands-on experimentation.
It's about going from consumer to creator, even if it's just for your own learning purposes.
Exactly. And you never know, that deep dive might spark an idea for a new tool or a library that you can contribute back to the community. Which brings us to Memeno's thoughts on content creation, writing blog posts, giving talks, sharing your knowledge in whatever way you can.
Honestly, I've always felt a bit intimidated by that whole content creation thing. It feels like you need to be some kind of expert with years of experience to have anything worth sharing.
That's such a common misconception. But Mamino, he encourages everyone to share their learnings, regardless of their experience level. He even suggests this simple exercise. Write down one new thing you learned each day. At the end of the week, review your notes and see if anything sparks your curiosity. Maybe that's the seed for your first blog post or conference talk.
It's about reframing content creation as a form of learning and self-discovery, rather than this pressure to be like the ultimate authority on a topic.
Precisely. And the act of actually explaining something clearly to others, it forces you to really solidify your own understanding. Plus, you might end up helping someone else who's struggling with the same concept.
Right. It's like that saying, the best way to learn something is to teach it.
Exactly. And it all feeds back into that force multiplier effect we keep talking about. By sharing your knowledge and experience, you're raising the bar for the entire community.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. The technical skills, the mindset, the importance of continuous learning, knowledge sharing. But I'm curious, what was Mamino's final takeaway, the big aha moment he wanted to leave readers with?
It's something that's incredibly reassuring, especially for those of us who, feel that pressure to be perfect in this field. He reminds us that nobody is expected to be amazing at everything. Seniority is not about achieving some mythical level of superhuman expertise.
Okay, that's a huge relief to hear because it takes the pressure off of trying to master every single technology and framework out there.
Exactly. It's about knowing your strengths and, just as importantly, knowing your weaknesses. It's about finding that sweet spot where you can contribute most effectively, leveraging your expertise, but also recognizing that there will always be areas where you can grow.
And that's where teamwork becomes essential, right? You surround yourself with people who have different strengths, and you all work together to create something way greater than any one individual could achieve alone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Software development is rarely a solo endeavor. It's this collaborative process that thrives on diverse perspectives and shared knowledge. And senior engineers, they play this key role in fostering that collaborative spirit, acting as mentors, guides, and those force multipliers who elevate the entire team.
It's about recognizing that your success is truly intertwined with the success of your team and ultimately the success of the organization as a whole.
Beautifully put. And that brings us to Mamino's final and maybe most profound point. He reminds us that seniority is not a destination, it's a journey. It's this ongoing process of learning, growth, and evolution.
So it's not like you hit this senior engineer level and then you can just coast. You're constantly pushing yourself, exploring new technologies, refining your craft.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so exciting. It's about embracing that lifelong learner mentality, that curiosity and passion that drives us to explore, experiment, and constantly push the boundaries of what's possible.
That is a fantastic note to end on. It's inspiring, it's motivating, and it gives us a lot to think about as we continue on our own journeys in the world of software development.
I agree. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to check out Luciano Mamino's blog post for yourself and to continue exploring this ever-evolving world of senior software engineering.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharing your knowledge with the world.